Right, so morning and welcome everybody. Before I hand you over to Steve and Adam, I just want to give you a bit of background into the need for this webinar this morning. This webinar has been born out of our most recent State of the Market survey, which we put to members. I mean, before we did this, we know that the industry has been hit hard by coronavirus and lockdown. However, the results of the survey only serve to exemplify the struggle that we're all in. The graphs on screen here highlight the belief from the respondents that it will be at least 18 months before the industry is back and operating in a strong position again. And when you couple this with the other information we received, that up to 40% of the respondents would opt to make staff redundant rather than support costs, it's going to be tough times ahead for everybody. It paints a bad picture. In addition to our research, we also have the figures and the data from the Hospitality Supplier Alliance survey, and that estimates that almost 470,000 people in the sector could lose their jobs if the government support is withdrawn. And we are, just like to highlight, we are working with Hospitality Action as part of the lobbying to try and secure this funding. But unfortunately, there's no way of sugarcoating the figures. The next few months will be tough, which is why we've put together this webinar covering the key aspects for anyone looking to enhance their job prospects over the coming months. So with those figures in mind and that data, I'd like to hand over to Adam Mason to give you an update.
Thanks very much, Adam, and good morning, everybody. Those of you that don't know me, I'm Adam Mason. I'm Director General of ceda, and happy to take part in the webinar this morning, a joint FEA and ceda initiative. I think what Adam's done there for us is kind of frame the situation, the circumstance, A, that we find ourselves in, but B, that's coming down the line. And we try to remain and retain as much positivity as possible. But I think it's important to be realistic, honest with the sector and with what we're doing, both individually as associations, but collectively, to try and enhance the opportunities and benefits for our respective memberships to kind of move forward. So the main bulk of the session today will come from Steve, but I've been invited to say a few words about an initiative that we launched 3 or 4 weeks ago now, and that initiative is called ceda Retain. At its very top level, we kind of saw this coming several weeks ago, several months ago, saw that in order for the industry collectively to bounce back as well and as efficiently and as effectively as possible, we need to retain as much talent, experience, skill in the industry. And so anybody who finds themselves, finds their position has been made redundant, can join and be part of ceda Retain. Go to ceda.co.uk/ceda Retain, complete a short form which just details your location, your expertise, a short write-up and biography about yourselves, what the kind of position and opportunity that you're looking for. That then puts that profile that you create in front of 120 ceda members in the members area of the ceda website. And as this progresses, we'll actually start to, because we're getting a lot of inquiries from employers in other areas to say, we're not recruiting now, but we might be in a couple of weeks. Therefore, we'd like very much to work with you to see what availability of talent that you have on your books, so to speak. We're deriving no income whatsoever from this. It's an opportunity looking to retain as much talent as possible. As I say, once they've completed the form online, that then goes and creates a profile. And a couple of other things that we're actually doing with the people that sign up is to provide them with the opportunity to continue their professional development. So to give them access to our e-learning platform. And again, this is free of charge and unlimited access to anybody that's signed up. And what that gives them is access to over 100 generic business ceda certificated and CPD accredited learning modules. And these cover the plethora of business skills that you require or you would find in any business. So from sales, account management, presentation, leadership, HR, health and safety, marketing, customer service, etc., etc. In addition to that, we've been running a weekly webinar schedule for about 11 weeks now, and we've ran close to 70. And whilst it's fair to say that as more and more ceda members of staff are returning from furlough and becoming active and becoming busy, that we're now operating 2 to 3 a week. At its peak, it was kind of 7 to 8 a week. But again, those that are involved in ceda Retain can absolutely join these webinar schedules, and predominantly their suppliers, presentations, be it equipment training, be it knowledge gathering, but also there's some generic topics as well that go through that. So as I said at the time when we launched, you know, if we can help to retain one person, 2 people, half a dozen people, a dozen people in this great industry, it will have absolutely been worth it, because to see talent, expertise, experience, skill, and just generally good people leave would be more devastating than what we're actually have been through over the last few months and continue to go through. So I don't know, Adam, if you want to open up for questions now, or if you want questions in the chat box, or if you want questions at the end of Steve's. I'm happy to do anything to fit in with that. But that's hopefully given you an overview of ceda Retain. And please do either contact me directly or get in touch at ceda.co.uk/ceda Retain. We're getting good coverage on social media, and so you should be able to find the details. But as I say, I'm more than happy to take a call or receive an email from anybody that wants further information.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, if you do have any questions, just pop them in the chat box, and we can answer them at the end and go through them there. But, thank you again. So, Steve, if you want to take over.
All what I'm going to do is just this is always the nervous bit for me. There we go. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
So thanks everyone for logging in, and thanks to FEA and ceda for giving me the opportunity to do this. I just following on from a point that Adam Mason made there quite correctly. I offered to do this webinar, and there's no charge attaching to the trade associations for my time or presenting here at all. I think that's only right given the situation we find ourselves in right now. So this is about CVs. Why are we here today? You can read that for yourself. You don't need me to read it for you. But one of the things that we can see is that whilst as I say there, the digitisation of the job seekers market comes along, it doesn't take away the necessity for a CV and a covering letter. And hang on to that idea of a covering letter as well, because we're going to come back to that later on as well. It's a major part of a CV, in my opinion. And like lots of you in the room, I can see some people there that are running their own businesses, and some that are managers and MDs and so on. And we sit sometimes on both sides of the table, don't we? We see people that produce a bad CV for us. And we've got our own CV as well, which is tucked away somewhere that we get out and dust off every now and again. But today isn't about career advice or techniques or whatever. It's about learning how to create or develop that CV. And listen and look to what I've said there in the last line. You've got to make yourself the ideal candidate for your target employer. Have an idea of who it is you think you want to go work for, and then start to target them and work out how you're going to do that. This whole presentation is about a dozen slides, so it's going to be pretty short, sharp and punchy. And I hope that I've applied a huge amount of realism in here. Certainly when we look at this slide here, I hope the situation is not going to be as bad as I fear that it might be. And I hope that in 12 to 18 months, you can all come back to me and say, haha, you were wrong. Everything was great. I would love that, I can tell you. But I think we saw over the weekend, there were a lot of people out and about. The initial bounce in positivity is great to have, but I think the next period is going to be pretty tough for us in non-food supply. We're in the capex business. We're not in the one-off business. Sorry, we're not in the the small wares business, although some of us are, of course. But there'll be an increase in pricing competition. There'll be margin difficulties and all the rest of it. And I fear somewhat for when the furlough scheme disappears. And we know that we're seeing the job losses coming along already. So I don't want to scare anybody. You can scare yourselves if you want to. But I would say look at your CV now while you've got the chance to do it out of choice rather than out of need. That's going to be the important thing. So let's get down to the meat of it. How do we get it right? Buckle up, because this is going to be pretty punchy and I hope quite uncompromising as well. Some practical advice here to start with. My sort of house design of 3 little boxes there. What to do if you're actually going through redundancy. You can read the boxes again for yourselves, but don't go ranting off on social media. I see a number of posts all the time from people, and sometimes I think that what they're doing is they're inviting their mates to say, sorry to hear that, terrible situation, cream always rises to the top, something will come along. And that is pretty reassuring and comforting for people. But try not to do that. Try and stay professional, because your future employer will have done their homework on you, as well as you hopefully doing research on them. The middle box here, just evaluate where your mind is at, and just remember that it's not you that's been made redundant. It's your role that's been made redundant, if that's what unfortunately happens. It's not that you've lost your job. Think of it as being making yourself available for employment. And that sounds like a small change, but of course, if you're in that situation, it alters your mindset and makes you more positive straight away. And again, try and stay optimistic, be objective. We all know if we run companies and someone decides to leave and move on, hopefully to something better, we generally reconcile ourselves to the fact that we're going to have the opportunity to look for someone that may be better for us in the future. Do that with yourself as well. What opportunities will this present you with for you in the future? What can you bring to the table for your next employer? So, 1, 2, 3, when you're actually writing it, we've got to talk about what it looks like, we're going to talk about you, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what research you're doing ahead of time. So these are the absolute basics to me. 3 basics here. When you finish proofreading it, get someone else to proofread it for you. I always got very tired of seeing CVs from people who said they had a huge attention to detail, but their CVs were full of spelling mistakes and grammar errors. If any of you went to school during the period when teachers were saying, don't worry, Johnny, spelling doesn't matter, grammar doesn't matter, I can tell you it does. And if that is the difference between you and another applicant, then get it right. This second one is something that people always raise their eyes at a little bit, but tailor your CV. You don't need one CV, you need a master CV, and then you need 2 or 3 subsets on it. Because many of us in the industry, one of the beautiful things about hospitality, no matter what side of the fence you're on, we gain a multiplicity of skills as we go through our lives. So although your business card might say that you are in logistics, or you are in service, or you are in sales or customer service, you'll have other skills as well. And it's a question of highlighting in your the CV that you're going to use for your actual job application, the skills that you've got that are going to match that employer. Your master remains the same, but you bring these things out to the fore. And think about that quite carefully. Of course, it goes true to say, be honest about it. Don't, I say greatly overinflate, but don't overinflate your achievements. This is a small industry and you'll get caught out. It's as simple as that. Some of us, some of you that may find yourselves unemployed might leave the industry. And that's a scary thought if you've been in it for a long time. It is scary. It does give you the chance ever so gently to reinvent yourself. But it also means that you're probably not going to see an employer that you know. So that means that your CV needs to be very honest, very tailored, and very correct. So those absolute basics are critical. Let's get down to it. Layout, format, and style. You've got to fit in, but you've got to stand out. So don't list everything that you've ever done on your CV. You know, if you've got 15 O-levels, good on you. But once you get past a certain age and a certain amount of experience, that's not what is going to tick the right boxes for people. You've got to distill your experience down to a couple of pages. And it's got to be very, very punchy. It's got to be, who am I? This is what I've done. And this is where I've got my education. And don't forget, your education isn't only what you did at school, or maybe for anyone that went to university. Your education came the moment you started going out to work. And that's something that you've got to work into your CV as well. So for a lot of roles, there in the middle box, a bit of colour, a bit of slightly fresher layout will go a long way, but don't experiment too much. Keep it bold, keep it easy to read, keep it memorable. Don't forget, if you're going for a job for a finance, in a finance role, for example, people don't want quirky in finance. They want pretty steady, they want pretty straight. I won't use the word boring, but they want people that are going to just deliver month on month on month. So think of that when you put the CV and the design together. Always do a test print. You know that whoever is going to read it is 99 times out of 100 going to print it, or his assistant or her assistant is going to print it for them. And the number of times I've got CVs where there's a single word on another page, or halfway through a job description, it goes into another page. So print it, modify it if you have to get it into the format that you know you want it to be, and then save it as a PDF. So you make sure that if someone's using a different print system, it will come out exactly the same as it went in. Those are all quite basic things, but pretty important. Talking about your experience now, I got tired of reading CVs, which were an endless set of job descriptions. I interviewed a lot of people in my career in a lot of different roles and disciplines, whether it was finance, whether it was sales, logistics, purchasing, no matter what it happened to be. And I got tired of reading things that where people said, I was, just to use an example, I was a salesman here, then I went on to being a salesman there, and then I went on to being a salesman there. And of course, the job titles become a little bit more exciting as people go along. But don't just describe that series of tasks that you did. I looked after territory, I looked after a person, I looked after 5 dealers, 3 key accounts. What did you achieve while you were doing it? It may be something quite small, but nevertheless, it's something you can pull out. It's something you can highlight, look to the next point. It's something you can put a bullet point next to by saying, this is what I did, this is what I achieved, this is what set me apart, this is what made me different, this is why the company needed to keep me, that's why I was poached by XYZ other company for these reasons. So feature those wins. You've got to make this an interesting document. And there's something I've always believed in very strongly there in the third box. Your career has got to be progressing, because once some of us get to a certain age, you know, you are going to move sideways. That's a fact of life. But when you're much, much younger, you want to be able to illustrate progression. So you've got to, I like that first sentence I put down there, summarize your skills and experience in a widening, growing trajectory. You've got to see where the person started and where they've ended up. And it's your job to show that in the CV. It's not the interviewer's job to try and work out why you moved from company A to company B. And obviously make it clear that you've got more to learn and offer. Talk about any gaps that you might have had and be serious and honest about them. If you've had a gap in your CV or your employment, say so. If you're a female and you had a child gap, be proud of it. You know, be proud of it, because I'm sure you would have learned a heck of a lot more about yourself and how to manage things when you were off managing a growing family than you were at work. If you didn't have a gap because you were having a family, I'm not saying invent something, but make sure it wasn't just, oh, you know, I had a couple of months off. And I've had people that said that to me. I just decided I would take a couple of months off over the summer. Well, that's not the kind of person that's going to stand up strongly against the next candidate. A little bit here, you know, what if I've been on furlough, as many, many, many people are, of course, or actually out of work. So you won't be the only one. And Adam Mason was quite right a moment ago with all of the webinars and training and so on that you've done. And if someone says to you, well, so what did you do during furlough or when you were out of work? And just look at the amount of content that there's been on the internet and how powerful that middle paragraph would be, as opposed to saying, yeah, I went and I learned Spanish or I learned some magic tricks. If you did, that's great, you know, fabulous, good on you. But nevertheless, you've got to think of yourself standing in front or sitting in front of your next employer and saying, this is what I did. But not only what I did, but what I learned from those things that I saw. This is how it enables me to understand where the industry's going or what the opportunities are or whatever. So number 3 of the boxes, research and references. You've got to do your homework on the role, the hiring manager, the company, and the sector you're applying for. And if you come back to what we talked about before, frame your achievements accordingly. Because if you're going for a company that is planning huge growth in the next 3 to 5 years, it's no good if your CV stresses the fact that you're steady Eddie. They don't want steady Eddie. They're looking for someone that can help them grow. Ditto, if it's perhaps a smaller company that says we're looking to consolidate our position, having now taken on a new product or whatever it happens to be, it's no good saying that I'm the guy that's going to bring you all the growth you need, because, or the girl, of course, that will bring you all the growth you need, because that's not what they're initially looking for. So it's about making yourself the person that they want to see. References. This is always a difficult one. You know, I say to my own children, even when they move jobs, they say, yeah, Fred has said he'll give me a reference. And I said, well, get it now, because in a year's time, when you moved on, the guy that you were working for may have moved on as well. You may not be able to find him. He may not look back and think of you so warmly as he does right now. If he's had to make your role redundant, he's going to be feeling as nervous as you are, I can tell you. So get that written reference from him right now, and make sure he's senior, not just someone that's alongside you. Go to the most senior person that you can find and get that reference. And don't say to them, will you give me a reference? Say, if I write my own reference, will you sign it? Now, normally people will say, yeah, I will, but let me see it first. But that's fine. They may change a few words, but just be forthright in what you want them to say. If you want them to say, I'm going to over-illuminate now, but if you want them to say this person was absolutely flipping supersonic, then put it down. Say it. Get them to write it down. And that's what I say. If you have to write it for them, do it, because they will sign it. People will help you. But get references, and get references throughout your career. When you leave a job, even if you leave the job of your own volition completely and utterly, get a reference. Get references from your customers, as well as senior members of the company. So, so, so important, because you've always got them there. Just one more thing now, applying, and we're going to come back to a couple of things that I talked about before. If you're applying directly for a job, you might be applying for someone for an existing role, or you might be applying speculatively. But make sure you've got an understanding of that company in your CV. Think back to that master that I talked about, and then the derivatives, and your covering letter. Your covering letter is the document that will make the employer want to see your CV. The CV is the thing that will make him want to give you an interview. And if, as I fear, in the next year to 18 months, there will be a great, great, great number of people competing for a diminishing number of positions, that is going to be very important. So think covering letter, think CV. The middle box, are you using a recruiter? I love recruiters. I think they're great. And I've used recruiters on both sides of the fence many, many times. Good recruiters charge lots of money. Some pretty decent recruiters don't charge quite so much. But here's the thing. Make sure you see the exact document the recruiter sends. The number of times, again, I get CVs from recruiters, and there's bits that have been blanked out because the recruiter doesn't want you to see it. They blank out your home address because they don't want you to see it, which personally I find quite insulting. So recruiters will reformat, they will rewrite your CV, and are they going to do a better or a worse job than you are at selling your skills? Most recruiters won't use your covering letter, and that, as I've said to you in the first box there on the left, is essential. The covering letter will make the employer look at your CV. Okay, so think of that quite carefully, and talk to the recruiter and find out how much he's charging. Because if a recruiter is saying 20 to 22 to 25% of your salary, that's a big ask. And if the employer thinks that you just throw something up on LinkedIn and get a lot of invitations or a lot of applications, I should say, then what's the recruiter going to do for you? So make sure you know what the recruiter's going to do, follow them, chase them, and make sure that the job that you're going for has the information that you wanted to give. Of course, it goes without saying that if you're unsuccessful, and even at an unsuccessful interview, you can learn things, ask for feedback. If you feel it's fair, adjust your approaches. If you think that the person interviewed you, the reason they've turned you down is just not fair or wasn't applicable, then ignore it, carry on exactly as you were. But if it's fair, adjust your approaches accordingly. After all, at that stage, you've got absolutely nothing to lose at all. That's it. thank you very much, everybody, for listening. I said it would be short and punchy, and I think it was. So, Adam, do we want to, if I hit that one there, I think that's it. I think we're back now. I hope so.
Yeah, so thanks, Steve.
Okay.
Just
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you.
One question come in here. So it's about maternity leave, and it says, is this something you should put openly on your CV, even if you went back to the same job role after 9 months? Or is it something that you should mention in an interview?
Personally, I mean, I'm not a woman, but I know lots of them, and I've interviewed lots of them, and I've employed, I was going to say hundreds, but certainly scores of them. I think that if you have had time off, I say time off, it shouldn't be time off. If you've been away from full-time paid employment in order to have a baby, you should rejoice in the fact. And I would be proud of putting it on there. And I would say, yes, that's what I've done. Because to me, I think, I'm not saying that, you know, women that haven't had babies are in any way short of anything, but it adds to your understanding of life and the world and everything. So it is a fact of life. I have no compunction about saying rejoice in it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah, just in response to something in the chat box, yeah, we'll be putting this presentation up on our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to get the video. But the other question is, will they be able to get a copy of the slides, Steve?
I can send them. Shall I send them to you, Adam? Or,
yeah, and I'll put them up. Okay.
I'll send the slides to Adam, and you're welcome to them. And of course, again, as I said on my last webinar 2 months ago now, believe it or not, if anybody wants to contact me and have a no obligation but certainly confidential chat, then you're very welcome.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any more questions they'd like to answered? No,
everybody pretty happy with that. Everybody thinking, actually, that's not as good as the CV I've got already.
I wouldn't say that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all I can say then, everybody, is thanks very much for listening in. I hope there were some gems in there for you somewhere, and some things that you can apply and use. This is a very, very important part of our lives, I think, in the next year or two.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. And then,
okay.
Thank you.
Just keep your eyes peeled for all our forthcoming webinars. We'll be promoting those on LinkedIn and Twitter and our emails, so keep up to date with what we've got going on. But, thank you, Adam, and thank you, Steve.
Okay. Yeah. Hello to Robert Gale there, quickly, if you're still on, Robert.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Steve, and thank you, everyone.
Yeah, okay. Thanks. Good to talk to you, Robert. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.